Every giant begins small, within reason. The largest animal to have ever lived, the blue whale, enters the world as no bigger than a small car. Elephant calves can stand within minutes of being born. Even the largest dinosaurs began life inside eggs no bigger than a football. But the animals we are looking at today begin at a size almost beyond comprehension, scarcely larger than a kernel of popcorn. From that beginning, it will increase its body mass more than 60 million times. Its skeleton will transform. Its body will abandon one of the defining features of nearly every fish that has ever lived. And it will grow into the heaviest bony fish on Earth. This is Mola, the ocean sunfishes, a genus that challenges some of our most basic assumptions about how a vertebrate body can be built. Because when evolution produced this giant, it did something unexpected. It erased the tail. So how does a fish survive and ultimately dominate its niche after losing the very structure that seems to define what a fish should be? If you'd like to learn more, check out the document in the description with research papers and image credits. At first glance, the ocean sunfish seems almost misplaced among fishes. Its towering body ending abruptly where a tail should be. So what exactly is this animal? The genus Mola belongs to the order Tetraodontiformes, a lineage more commonly known for containing the pufferfishes, and a lineage renowned among ichthyologists for pushing the boundaries of the conventional fish body plan. Across this group, evolution has repeatedly favoured structural innovation over adherence to tradition. Many species possess fused teeth that form powerful beaks, reduced skeletal elements, and compact, highly derived forms, clues that these fishes share a long history of anatomical experimentation. Some inflate their bodies dramatically when threatened. Others encase themselves in rigid, box-like armor. Sunfishes represent perhaps the most extreme expression of this evolutionary tendency. A body not merely modified, but fundamentally reorganized. Yet recognizing the genus is only the beginning. To understand the sunfish, we must narrow our focus further to a family where evolutionary constraint appears to have loosened even more dramatically. Within Tetraodontiformes lies the family Molidae, the molars or sunfishes, a small lineage that has taken structural reduction to an extraordinary extreme. Today, the family contains 3 living genera. The genus Mola includes the heaviest of all bony fishes, animals so large they can drift like living platforms through the open ocean. But not all sunfish follow this path towards gigantism. The sharp-tailed molar, Masturus lanceolatus, retains a more elongated body and a distinct tapering rear edge, a reminder that the familiar rounded silhouette of the ocean sunfish is not the only solution this family has explored. Rarer still is the slender sunfish, Ranzania laevis, smaller, more streamlined, and capable of stronger sustained swimming. It hints at what an earlier stage in sunfish evolution may have resembled before this lineage began pushing toward ever more radical proportions. Yet it is within Mola that these evolutionary trends reach their most dramatic expression. For centuries, nearly all ocean sunfishes were grouped under a single name. Only with the careful re-examination of museum specimens, and later the aid of genetic analysis, did scientists realize that multiple giant species had been hiding in plain sight. Today, 3 species are widely recognized. The best known is Mola mola, the ocean sunfish, or common mola. It is a widespread inhabitant of temperate oceans and long considered the archetypal member of the group. In southern hemisphere waters, it is often accompanied by Mola alexandrini, the bump-head sunfish. Typically larger and distinguishable by subtle differences in body proportions and the shape of the rear fins. The most surprising addition arrived only recently. Described in 2017, Mola tecta, the hoodwinker sunfish, had evaded recognition for decades despite its enormous size. A reminder that even some of the ocean's largest inhabitants can remain scientifically elusive. Together, these species reveal that what once seemed like a single evolutionary curiosity is, in fact, a small but remarkable radiation, multiple lineages refining variations on an already unconventional design. To understand how an animal can grow to such extraordinary proportions, we first need to examine the body it grows into, because, at first glance, the sunfish scarcely resembles a fish at all. Seen side on, the body is almost circular, almost as tall as it is long, and appears to end abruptly, as though the rear half of the animal was simply missing. Sunfishes are the largest of all bony fish. The heaviest reliably recorded weighed roughly 2,700 kilograms, about the same as a black rhinoceros, and individuals can exceed 4 meters in height, taller than a typical city bus. In most fishes, the body tapers toward a powerful caudal fin, more commonly known as the tail. This is the engine, a structure refined over hundreds of millions of years to generate thrust efficiently across the water. But in the genus Mola, that familiar blueprint has been radically rewritten. The tail is gone. In its place is a rounded structure known as the clavus, formed not from a reduced caudal fin, but from modified fin rays that create a stiff, rudder-like edge at the rear of the body. Rather than extending backward into a propulsive tail, the vertebral column effectively stops short, producing a form that looks less streamlined and more abruptly truncated. Evolution is often imagined as a process that builds, adding armor, teeth, or speed. Yet in sunfishes, evolution simplified, it removed, it compressed. The result is one of the most distinctive body plans ever produced among bony fishes. This restructuring extends beyond the loss of the tail. The body itself is laterally flattened, that is, flattened from side to side. It is also relatively rigid, lacking the sweeping flexibility that allows many fishes to generate thrust by passing waves of motion from head to tail. A sunfish does not glide through the water in fluid undulations. Its body moves very little at all. Such rigidity would seem to present an obvious mechanical problem. If the body cannot bend, and the tail cannot drive propulsion, how does the animal move? The answer lies in a different solution for swimming. Instead of relying on a rear propeller, sunfish generate lift with their elongated dorsal and anal fins. Beating in near synchronization, these fins act almost like a pair of vertical wings, pulling the fish forward with steady, controlled strokes. The clavus then functions less as a source of power and more as a stabilizer and rudder, helping maintain direction as the animal travels through the open ocean. Despite their unusual form, sunfishes are far from helpless drifters. Individuals are capable of sustained travel across open ocean basins, maintaining steady cruising speeds and undertaking extensive vertical migrations through the water column. Their movements, however, are not built for agility. Rapid acceleration is limited, and turns tend to be slow, the inevitable trade-off of a large, rigid body propelled by lift rather than sweeping tail movements. But evolution does not demand perfection. It demands sufficiency. If the body plan is sufficient for their lifestyle, it does not need to be perfect. And for an animal specializing in abundant, slow-moving prey, endurance matters far more than maneuverability. The skin, too, reflects the demands of this unusual design. It is thick, sometimes up to 15 centimeters, and tough, with tiny embedded scales that fuse into a dense dermal layer, closer to biological armor than to the more flexible, overlapping scales seen in many other fishes. For a large, relatively inflexible swimmer inhabiting predator-rich waters, such protection is not merely advantageous, it is essential. At the front of the body, another hallmark of their lineage becomes apparent. The teeth are fused into a dense, beak-like structure, forming a powerful biting surface suited to capturing soft-bodied prey. It is a feature shared with their close relatives, a subtle clue that, however strange the sunfish may appear, it did not evolve in isolation. Taken together, these traits produce a body that seems to challenge the conventional rules of fish design, truncated, rigid, and propelled by an entirely different mechanical strategy. And yet, this is no evolutionary accident. It is a form shaped by selection, refined across millions of years, into a design capable of crossing vast pelagic distances. The sunfish is not a poorly designed fish. It is exquisitely designed for an unusual niche. A body built for steady, energy-efficient travel does more than determine how a sunfish moves. It shapes how the animal interacts with its entire environment. Across the world's temperate and tropical oceans, species of Mola spend much of their lives in the open water column, far from the shelter of reefs or coastlines. Satellite tracking has revealed individuals capable of traveling vast distances, their path tracing slow arcs across ocean basins in search of productive feeding grounds. Yet, these journeys are not confined to the surface. Sunfishes are frequently vertical migrants, descending hundreds of meters into colder, darker waters before returning again toward the light. Such dives are thought to follow the movements of gelatinous zooplankton, a broad category of drifting animals that includes jellyfishes, salps, and siphonophores. Prey that may appear insubstantial, yet can occur in enormous numbers. But repeated descents into cold water create a physiological challenge. Body temperatures can drop, muscles cool, and activity slows. And so, after returning from depth, sunfishes are often observed performing one of their most recognizable behaviors. They bask. At the surface, a sunfish may lie on its side, dorsal fin exposed to the air, appearing almost motionless against a shifting sea. Early observers struggled to interpret this posture, sometimes assuming illness or incapacity. Yet the behavior is now widely understood as functional, a means of absorbing solar warmth after deep thermally taxing dives. In this light, the common name sunfish becomes less poetic and more descriptive, an animal quite literally drawing energy from the sun. Surface visits may serve another purpose as well. The thick skin that protects the sunfish is also prone to colonization by parasites. While basking, individuals have been documented attracting the attention of seabirds, which pick across the body in search of an easy meal. In some regions, reef fishes are thought to provide similar cleaning services when sunfishes approach coastal stations. What appears at first glance to be passive behavior is, in reality, a form of maintenance, thermoregulation paired with parasite removal. Even feeding reflects the logic of their design. Rather than pursuing fast-moving prey, sunfishes tend to exploit abundant but slower weak swimmers. Their fused, beak-like teeth allow them to grasp soft-bodied organisms efficiently, while structures deeper in the throat help break down gelatinous material. It is a strategy built not on speed but on availability. In the open ocean, where prey can be unpredictably distributed, specializing in sheer abundance may be more reliable than chasing agility. Taken together, these behaviors reveal an animal superbly matched to its ecological role, a deliberate traveler of pelagic highways, moving between depths, harvesting abundant food resources, and managing the thermal and biological costs of its environment. The sunfish is not adrift. It is operating according to a strategy millions of years in the making. And yet, perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of its life is not how it moves through the ocean, but how it begins, because a creature with the weight of a rhinoceros starts life almost too small to see. Among vertebrates, few reproductive strategies approach the sheer numerical scale seen in the ocean sunfish. A single female may release tens of millions of eggs during a spawning event, more than almost any other known vertebrate. It is a number so large that it invites an obvious question. Why produce so many? The answer lies in the nature of the open ocean itself. There are no nests here, no guarded territories, no parental protection. Eggs drift freely in the water column, exposed to currents, predators, and chance. For most, survival is measured in hours or days. Probability becomes the strategy. If even a tiny fraction endure, it is enough. When the larvae hatch, they bear little resemblance to the giants they will one day become. Covered in prominent spines and protected by a comparatively armored exterior, young sunfishes look strikingly similar to the juveniles of their distant relatives, a quiet reminder of their shared ancestry with the order Tetraodontiformes. At this stage, defense matters more than hydrodynamic elegance. A body that would seem cumbersome in an adult instead becomes protection against the many mouths of the pelagic world. But the transformation that follows is extraordinary. As the fish grows, those defensive spines recede, the body deepens, the skeleton reorganizes, the familiar outline, truncated, towering, and unmistakable, gradually emerges. Growth itself proceeds at a pace almost difficult to comprehend. From larvae weighing less than a gram, sunfishes may increase their mass millions of times over the course of their development, ultimately becoming the heaviest bony fishes alive. Such rapid enlargement is not merely impressive, it is protective. Size in the ocean is often a form of safety. With each order of magnitude gained, the number of potential predators declines. What begins life as vulnerable plankton slowly crosses an invisible threshold until very little in the sea is capable of threatening it. Yet, this strategy carries its own demands. To sustain such growth requires access to vast quantities of food and the ability to traverse equally vast distances. Pressures that help explain the endurance, feeding habits, and wide-ranging movements seen in adults. Seen in this light, the sunfish's entire biology begins to make sense. Extreme numbers of offspring offset the extreme early mortality. Rapid growth bridges the dangerous juvenile years. Gigantism secures relative safety. Each stage solves the problem created by the one before it. And so, the towering giant encountered in the open ocean is not an evolutionary anomaly, but the endpoint of a life shaped by arithmetic as much as anatomy, a numbers game played across millions of years. From eggs counted in the tens of millions emerges a creature large enough to redraw our expectations of what a fish can be. Taken in isolation, the ocean sunfish can seem almost improbable. A fish without a true tail, propelled by fins that move more like wings, beginning life as microscopic plankton before growing into one of the largest bony fishes on Earth. Yet, evolution rarely produces the improbable without reason. Within the broader radiation of the order Tetraodontiformes, radical experimentation appears almost to be the rule rather than the exception. Across this lineage, bodies have been armored, inflated, compressed, and restructured into forms that challenge our expectations of what a fish should look like. In sunfishes, that experimentation reached an unusual extreme. Instead of refining the traditional fish blueprint, evolution altered it, shortening the spine, eliminating the tail, and shifting propulsion toward a completely different mechanical system. What emerged was not a flawed design, but a specialized one. A body optimized for endurance, for vertical movement through the water column, and for exploiting prey that demands persistence more than speed. The result is a quiet reminder of a principle that runs throughout the history of life. Evolution does not work toward perfection. If a form survives, reproduces, and continues, then, by definition, it works, no matter how unconventional it may appear. And perhaps this is why the sunfish feels so eye-catching to us. It violates the mental template most of us carry for what a fish is meant to be. We expect streamlining, symmetry, and the familiar sweep of a tail. Instead, here we encounter a body that seems to end where it should begin. But nature is under no obligation to meet our expectations. Across millions of years, selection shaped this lineage into an animal capable of crossing entire ocean basins, regulating its temperature between deep and surface waters, and producing offspring in numbers vast enough to ensure continuity. Strange, then, is often just another word for successful. The ocean sunfish is not an evolutionary accident. It is evidence of how flexible a vertebrate polyplan can become, and of how many solutions life can discover when shaped by the open sea. Protecting wildlife is often easiest when the boundaries are clear. A forest can be preserved. A wetland can be restored. Even a migration corridor can be mapped and defended. But what of animals that belong not to coastlines or continents, but to the open ocean? The ocean sunfishes inhabit pelagic waters that stretch across national boundaries, conservation jurisdictions, and vast regions where enforcement is inherently difficult. Here, protection becomes less a matter of fencing habitat and more a question of international cooperation. The best studied species, the ocean sunfish, is currently considered vulnerable, with evidence suggesting population declines in parts of its range. Yet even this designation carries uncertainty, because monitoring animals that wander entire ocean basins is an immense scientific challenge. And as for the other Mola species, they have not even been assessed. The greatest threat is not deliberate hunting, but accident. Sunfishes frequently become entangled in drifting longlines and gill nets intended for other species, a phenomenon known as bycatch. Their immense size offers little protection against modern fishing gear, and mortality often goes unrecorded in the vastness of offshore fisheries. Their behaviour introduces further risk. At times, sunfishes rise to the surface and drift on their sides, exposing the broad flank of the body to the sun. We now have an idea why they do this, but in a modern ocean threaded with shipping lanes, basking transforms the fish into something dangerously close to an obstacle. Vessel strikes, once rare in the open ocean, are becoming increasingly likely as maritime traffic expands. Even plastic pollution plays a role. Gelatinous prey such as jellyfish can resemble drifting bags and fragments, drawing sunfishes toward material no animal evolved to recognize or digest. And yet, paradoxically, the very traits that expose sunfishes to danger also make them resilient. They produce astonishing numbers of offspring, disperse across enormous ranges, and remain among the most widespread of all large bony fishes. Their future, therefore, is unlikely to hinge on a single sanctuary or regulation. Instead, it reflects a broader question now facing marine conservation. How do we safeguard life in an ecosystem defined by motion? Protecting pelagic species demands coordination across nations, more selective fishing technologies, and a growing recognition that the health of the open ocean is inseparable from our own. For the sunfish, a giant adrift in the open seas, survival may depend less on any one policy than on a gradual reshaping of how humanity interacts with the marine environment. In the open ocean, far from the structure of reefs or coastlines, the familiar shapes of fish begin to dissolve. Bodies stretch into ribbons, inflate into spheres, or, in the case of the sunfish, compress into something that scarcely resembles a fish at all. What at first appears malformed is, in fact, the result of millions of years of refinement. Every missing structure, every fused bone, every altered fin, reflects a lineage that did not fail, but specialized, trading speed for efficiency, symmetry for stability, and convention for a design unlike any other vertebrate alive today. And yet, despite their immense size, much of their lives unfolds beyond our view, in waters most humans will never enter. We encounter them only briefly, a drifting giant at the surface, a shadow passing beneath a boat, a silent reminder of how little of the ocean we truly understand. The sunfish challenges our expectations of what a fish should be, but evolution has never been constrained by expectation, only by what works. Sometimes what works looks almost unbelievable. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the ocean sunfishes. If this video sparked your curiosity, don't let it stop here. Share it, talk about it, and keep learning. There's still so much to discover about the world's rare and remarkable species. And the more we understand, the better our chances of protecting them. Thanks for watching.